So we are recording again. We had a new guest join us, Jennifer Jones, who practiced law with Jim Sheets. So she is here to help support him in his interview and make sure that he's telling the truth in all of this. Okay, so we left off with your kindergarten, where you went to kindergarten.
It was either the Academy building or the old building on Pleasant Street that is now gone.
Okay.
And then I went right over to the Harper Valley PTA building, and that's where I went to high school and graduated from high school.
Okay. What year did you graduate?
1960.
Okay. And then have you lived anywhere else besides just Lebanon?
Well, yes, I mean, it's sort of a long story, but I'll make it very short. I went to college from Lebanon, and after that I started in law school, and I lived in Lebanon with my parents, and there was a thing called Vietnam and a draft when I was in law school, and only taking 9 hours at night at Chase College of Law, located on the third floor of the YMCA in downtown Cincinnati. Now this was a posh, upscale law school, and that's a joke. And so then, because I didn't want to go into the Army, I went into the Air Force, and by the sheerest of accident became a pilot.
Wow.
And when I got out of the Air Force, I came back and went back to law school, started all over again, courtesy of Jennifer's father.
Fred Jones.
Fred Jones. Okay. So did you move back to Warren County, or did you move back after you?
Well, when I came back, by that time I was married, and my wife was a professor at UC, and so we had a house in Lebanon.
Okay.
I mean Cincinnati, and after she died in 1999, I determined that I wasn't going to work anymore, and that I didn't want to be any place that I had to wear long pants and shoes. So I'm now happily in Florida.
Okay. So, leading up to your time at the Silver Street Jail, what other jobs did you have prior to that?
Well, in high school, I was a lifeguard at the local pool, and I think I managed the pool for a while. My future wife taught Robin, her name, taught synchronized swimming and was a lifeguard as well.
Where was that pool located? Do you remember?
Monroe Street or Monroe.
Something like that. I lifeguarded there too.
Right, everybody you go to talk to. There.
Anything else you would like to let us know about your history?
Well, I guess for the benefit of the genealogy people, I will tell you that my family arrived on these shores in 1732 from Germany. And they came aboard the ship the Dragon out of Rotterdam and came to Philadelphia. And in due course went to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and in due course moved to Shenandoah Valley. They were farmers and Indian fighters. And anybody that was in the Shenandoah Valley that early was, perforce, an Indian fighter as well as a farmer. They decamped to Warren County after the War of 1812, where my grandfather John received 160 acres of what was called a land warrant at the time, near Red Lion. And that's where we've been ever since. My sister still is in town. My parents had the baby shop, then turned that into the Falabella shop for PR reasons, and they had that for many years. In fact, they started the baby shop, I think, in 1943 or 44, I suspect, after I was a couple of years old.
Where was that located?
Several places. Right across the street from the Golden Lamb was the major. They were there for many years.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start with the jail-specific questions about your time there. So what years were you employed at the jail? And I know you had special circumstances, right?
Well, that's sort of a long story, but I kind of got tired of working at the pool and doing that sort of thing, and I got interested in, I don't know, law enforcement or whatever. The way I made it there, I got hired by a guy named Ed Cramner, Jennifer's uncle, who was a lawyer, to collect. They had a lot of liens. All lawyers' offices had a lot of uncollectible liens, so he wanted me to go out and find some automobiles or some assets of these people that didn't pay up. So that was fun, and I was fairly successful at that.
What year was that?
Oh my goodness. I graduated from college in 1964, and then I was gone, so it was before 1964.
I think you told me summer of '63 is when you were at the jail. So.
Probably, I was more than that. But anyway, I was doing that, and how I came to the jail was there's a sheriff named Byron Kennard, and they had at the time it's called special deputies. You weren't a real trained cop, and frankly, they weren't very trained either. But it was a volunteer sort of thing. It was kind of fun to ride around in the cruiser with the real deputies. And at the time when I signed on, we had 3 cruisers. One was driven by the sheriff, and there was 2 other ones. One took care of the northern part of the county, and the other one took care of the southern part of the county. It was my job to be the jailer and dispatcher, to run the radios in the jail. If they'd collect somebody up, I would go unlock the jail and toss them in there and lock them up, and I'd go back to being the dispatcher. And that was quite a lot of fun. And so in the summer times, I would come home, and Jennifer's father, Fred, let me do other things around the law office. I was kind of this was called Young and Jones at the time, and I was essentially a gopher. I called myself an investigator, which I did. I went around and took pictures and things like that, but I was essentially a gopher, and that was a lot of fun. So the jail, I should tell you, I learned how to play the guitar. Well, there was a guy named Archie Quentin Knight, and I'm sorry, Archie, if you're still alive, but I don't think you are. He would, I'd let him out. He was a guy that would break a window and just want to be in jail because he didn't know any place else to go. So I'd let him out, and he essentially taught me to play the guitar and lock him back up again.
Well, and we previously interviewed Vance Satterthwaite and Miriam Satterthwaite, and they said that they had regulars that did the same thing that Archie would do, where they would just find some reason to be put back in jail.
Yeah, I think
and they were allowed to go to like the corner store to get supplies
well,
for people.
They were called trustees.
Right. Yeah.
But they were just people that didn't have any place to go.
Right.
And so that was it. So then came along, I think, Roy Wallace was the sheriff for a long time, and I did the same, worked the same thing with him. And I did other jobs around town, but that was what I did. It got me very interested in the legal system of the law. So I went to right after I got out of college in 1960, I went to Ohio Wesleyan up in Delaware, and I went right to Chase by night. I don't recall ever taking the LSAT or any exams. I think Fred called up and told him I'd be down there. That was the end of that. So I did about, 6 months or so, and then a lady in town named Marge Kinsworthy was the draft lady in charge of the draft. And she said, you're getting close, you gotta do something. So I just left town and went to work at my uncle's down in Atlanta. Well, that didn't last, she caught me. So I enlisted in the Air Force.
Voluntarily?
Well, there was a good bit of duress because I didn't want to be in the Army.
Yeah.
And so I took a bunch of tests, and I never thought about being a pilot. And this recruiter says, I told him, I'm going to be in the Air Force, I might as well be a pilot. He said, no, you have to be a college graduate, and you have to be an officer, and there's all kind of, I said, look, I'm a college graduate, I've been at law school just a little bit. Well, that changed his attitude right there. So off we went. I took 2 days of tests at another Air Force base, and I'll be damned if I didn't pass. Surprised me. So, and that's how to become a fighter pilot, if anybody wants to know.
Those are the exact steps.
Exactly. So I did that for 6 years, and I came back, and Jennifer's father rehired me and paid me $10,000 a year, which was a princely sum because I was going to law school by then on the GI Bill and started all over again. And when I got out of law school, and again, people were quite surprised that I passed the bar exam. So I bought my own building up on Warren Street, 304 East Warren Street, and kind of rehabbed that, and commenced to practice law. And my first case was a divorce.
Can we talk about that at the end? So hang on, can you remember that? We're gonna go back to the Silver Street Jail first. And
Oh,
then
okay.
Once we're done asking those questions,
Okay.
then we're gonna get into
Okay,
the law practice,
It'll
so.
keep you in a flow, I
Yeah.
promise.
okay.
Okay, so, can you tell us about any of the other employees that worked at the jail with you? I know you mentioned a couple of the sheriffs.
Well, there was a guy named Farrell Baker who was a character from South Lebanon. Ed Heiser. Those were the two deputies. Now, mind you, there were only 2 automobiles at this time. And and later Roy Wallace. I knew Tom Harris very well. He was in the State Highway Patrol at the time. He later became sheriff.
Okay, what was a typical, day like for you?
For me,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a day, it was a night. I worked from midnight to 8 in the morning. And when I wasn't doing that, I could voluntarily just come over and ride around with the deputies at night or anytime I wanted to. So, I'd check in at night and be sure the radios worked. The 2 guys are out running around. If the phone rang, I'd say Warren County Sheriff's Office, and somebody would say, "My God, they just shot my dog," and I'd send the appropriate cruiser wherever it went. It really wasn't that exciting a job back then in Warren County. There wasn't a lot of miscreants, but there was some stuff, but it was fun to do.
Yeah. What were the conditions like in the jail?
Well, these days they would get sued. As you know, you've been in there, I'm sure. It was an old, ratty, stinky, and all jails, I don't care where they are, smell alike. So it wasn't a very pleasant place. We had 2 stories. We never used a second story unless there was a female and put her upstairs. And it had a basement, which was really grim. I invite you to go down there. And the guys would come in, and if a guy didn't want to talk to them, and when they asked questions, they'd sort of kick him down the stairs. And once you got to the bottom of the stairs, they'd ask him again. And they would probably answer the question.
Okay. What was the most memorable part of working at the jail?
Well, it was just, various incidences. I went on a raid one time over on Pennyroyal Hill in Franklin, and that was fun because we had the feds with us. Another time, they had a suspect cornered in a bar over in, or they knew where he was. The feds showed up, the FBI showed up, and Christ, they had people in trees and all this, and they wanted the locals to go in and arrest him. Well, everybody knew, the local sheriff and whatever. My job was to stand by the back door to be sure he didn't run out the back door. So by the way, I looked like I was about 12 years old and weigh all of 110 pounds. So I go and stand by the back door. And I had a gun, but I didn't take it out. I don't need that, I don't think. And they were going to catch him inside. So these guys bust in the front door. It's a rough bar. I hear this shouting and yelling, boom, boom, pitter, patter, bang, the screen door flies open. The guy runs out, runs right over me. The deputies run out and run right over me. So that was pretty much the end of my police career. You learn great lessons there.
And I know you said one of the prisoners taught you how to play the guitar. Did you have any other interesting interactions with anyone who was in the jail?
In the jail, I don't really, but he didn't really interact. They weren't there that long, usually. And there was a couple of homicides, but it was all very interesting.
Okay. And then, aside from being run over by a criminal and some deputies, do you have any other funny stories that you recall about the jail?
I'm 77. I can't go on forever. Well, no, not really. That just was to me, it was a fascinating, interesting job because I, led a rather sheltered childhood and didn't know about these things. I will tell you, I almost shot a guy once. The old King Powder Company had a business in there making cheap furniture out of pressed wood and whatever, and they used barrels of some chemical that the teenagers at the time wanted to sniff. One time an alarm drop came, somebody had broken in there, and myself and one other guy, I don't remember who it was, went down there dark and spooky and everything else, and looking for the guy. And we're walking around with flashlights and guns, and some kid jumps up like that and scared me. I just damn near shot him, and I'm, so glad I didn't.
Did you ever go into, so the front part of the jail was where the sheriffs had their residence?
Yes, they lived there. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go in that part?
No, I don't think ever went in there. Byron Kennard lived there, Roy Wallace lived there. I don't know if Tom lived there or not, I don't know.
They've done a lot of renovations, and we've just been trying to piece together what the setup was like when it was a residence and then it was a jail, because they've since broken down the barriers from the residence to where the jail entrances are. So for us to go through it, it looks much different than it would have in the 60s. So if you're looking at the front part of the house, or front part of the residence, was the sheriff's office on the left-hand side?
Yes.
Okay.
And up those little stairs. That's how you got in.
Okay. And then from there, there was a separate hallway in the back, do you know, with like a stairwell to go upstairs and downstairs?
I don't recall that. I don't recall there was an entrance to the residence, to the jail, frankly.
That's what so from the sheriff's office, would you lead the prisoners to the actual jail portion of it? But that was separated from the sheriff's residence.
Yeah, well, it was completely separate. No, they had one door into the jail, and you walk in and to the left with the dispatcher and the radios and such. And I think they had a couple of interview rooms, other than the one I told you about. But that was it. I mean, it's not as big as this room. Or, well, maybe it is, but that was all there was to it. You bring them in there in handcuffs and put them right in jail.
Okay. One last random question. There's an old stove in the attic of that building, and we're trying to figure out how they got this gigantic iron cooking stove up there.
I have
And
no idea.
we've been asking everyone if they know.
I've never been up in the attic.
Okay.
Well, we described it to Miriam Satterthwaite, who did live in the residence portion, and she says that was not her stove, and she doesn't know where it came from.
And she doesn't want it back, even if
Right.
it did.
Yeah. I'm not sure how they're gonna get it down the stairs.
Probably never.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew Dick Satterthwaite, and he was a sheriff before all this time. And
Yeah, they were one of the last families to live there.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were able to interview them, which was really interesting. Anything else you would like to add about the jail before we move on?
no, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, so now we can get back to your time spent practicing law in Warren County.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, I'd bought the building before I even passed the bar, and some people thought that was a little uppity. But and I had lawyers, when they pass the bar and start practicing the first time, will send out little announcements. I've opened my law office at such and such a place. I had those printed, and the minute I got my bar exam results, I sent those out to everybody in my law school class, and they're still mad about it. So it felt good.
You're ready to go.
Yes, ma'am. And in comes my first client for a divorce case. I charge princely sum of, I think, $200 retainer. And that afternoon, I had a dentist appointment at Dr. Testerman's office, who announced I need a crown, and announced that will cost me $200. That's a great lesson there in life. So I was practicing all by myself, and I had the house that I bought for the office was a fourplex, 4 old ratty apartments in it, and full of ratty furniture and that sort of thing. So I used just one portion of the building as my little law office, and I hired a secretary who and not tight. Well, I couldn't practice law either, so it was fine, and we got along just fine. And you just do stuff, and pretty soon I get hired by the prosecutor. And his name was Moore. Well, the first guy that hired me was Cliff Swan, who later died. He didn't hire me as a lawyer. He later hired me, let me be an investigator, and actually paid me. And so pretty soon Turkelson comes along, and he actually hired me as an assistant prosecutor. And with that, you get a badge. I already had a sheriff's badge, but I got a prosecutor's badge. And Turk was very careful to explain to me, you're not to take that badge out of your drawer, which was very wise. He knew me well. So I represented the welfare department, collecting child support for skips and things like that. And they give you a little courtroom experience, not much, but some. And that was sort of fun. That was before DNA and all this other stuff that just puts a hat right on the father. But then you actually had trials about it, and you got to get down to the down and dirty when, where, and what, which was a lot of fun. And I once found out that some young lady got pregnant on the couch of the then prosecutor, Jim Flannery. And this tickled me no end. And I had that transcript printed up and sent it over to him. We never got along all that well. People said it was just nothing but a personality difference. I had one, he didn't. And then I did that for a while, and then probate judge Bill Bowers hired me to be a juvenile court magistrate, which is kind of an assistant judge to do juvenile court work, and I did that several years, and it was the worst job I ever had. It's just heartbreaking. In fact, when I moved to Florida, I have a judge living down the street. He tried to talk me into going back into the juvenile court business as a guardian or something. I said, I don't want no part of that. I don't want to wear shoes and don't want to wear pants. I don't want to do that at all, period. So I was a small town lawyer, and pretty soon I had another guy come in to my office, and then I'd expand the whole bottom floor. And pretty soon I expanded the old.
And I came in.
I was getting to that. And I don't know, I don't remember exactly when Jenny came. I don't remember dates so well. But yeah, we practice law.
I'm gonna interject and have you actually move over next to him, since this is where you entered. So I introduced Jennifer Jones earlier, so we're gonna have this be a little bit different than we've had in the past, because she practiced law with Jim, and you gotta scoot a little closer, sorry.
You gotta get real cozy.
To be able to get you.
Perfect.
Okay.
You're both
So,
in there.
She's going to help support his stories about.
Support is
Right.
the operative
Right.
word.
And she can if you would like to also interject and tell some of your own stories, that would be great as well.
Sure, great.
So, okay. Please
Well,
continue.
well, as I say, being a small town lawyer, you do anything. I mean, you're one day you're starving, one day you're not, and one day you got a lot of money, next day you don't have any money, and so you take all kind of cases. I never liked to do probate work, and I really like trials, and this is where her father taught me. As a law student, I would go to trials and sit right beside him and carry papers and whatever. So the only reason I was able to start off my own law practice right out of law school was that, because in law school they don't teach you how to be a lawyer, and I had a good deal of trouble in law school because I just come out of the Air Force, and the professors were about the same age as I was, and I was a captain in the United States Air Force. And when I walk into a room, I expect those people to stand up. Well, I got a big shock because they didn't do that anymore. But these professors were about my age, and I didn't get along with them so well. I thought they were a bunch of idiots. They'd never been to a courthouse. They didn't do what I wanted to do, so I learned all about antitrust law and utterly irrelevant stuff. And I might tell you, when I first went to law school, we had a carpool. There was no Interstate 71 or 75. And 5 guys, myself, Fred Hubble, Jack Marshall, Morris Turkelson, who we've talked about, and a guy named Bob Olson, and everybody will know all these people from Lebanon. Carpool down to downtown Cincinnati to chase by night. And that was fun. On Route 42. So, as I say, I got to try a lot of cases over the years, and that's what I enjoyed doing.
So what were the majority of the types of cases?
Personal injury, automobile accidents, and that sort of thing, and that's what Jennifer's father taught me to do, how to do that.
Okay. And then you said you ran your own office. How many people worked for you there over the years? Or about, I guess, average?
Oh, golly. Dozen maybe, in and out, and Mike Butts, he's now deceased. Dave Ernst worked for me. Tom Deal. And this, I don't know, Jennifer, when did you come in? I don't remember who was there when you started.
Well, when I came, my dad was going on the bench, and so I came over you invited me to come over to your office, and I said, sure. So I think it was just the 2 of us there for a while, just with the secretary, and I don't think there were any other lawyers at that time.
Okay.
And I was there for a couple years, I think.
Can you provide a little background information on yourself for us?
Well, I went to Lebanon High School, Miami University, and Chase Law School also. But by the time I got to Chase, it had moved across the river into Kentucky, and we had an interstate. And so it made it a little easier, although we always went at night.
When did you graduate from Lebanon High School?
67.
Okay. And then when did you graduate from Miami?
71.
Okay.
And so, like Jim, we both kind of learned how to practice law from watching my dad. So we got book knowledge from law school, but we got practical knowledge from watching my dad in trials and so forth.
His name was Fred Jones?
Fred Jones.
Okay.
And he later became a judge on the 12th District Court of Appeals. And so, and we just did everything. And, you know, he just said, Jim, you handle this and I handle this, and so we just learned by doing, but we were successful nonetheless.
Nonetheless, by the sheerest of accident. And Jennifer's not telling you about the most memorable time in my office. This is an old building on 304 East Warren Street, and she had a nice little office. She had fixed it up nicely and everything. She comes in one morning, and the ceiling had fallen completely down on her desk. I had tenants above, and they may have been having a dance or something. I don't know. But she got a little overwrought about that. But we got it.
Old buildings.
We got it cleaned up, and off we went.
How long did you stay at that location?
I think I quit. Well, my wife died in '99, and I think I was pretty much out of there by 2001. And it had to be, I had a couple of, I just essentially gave my practice to I didn't sell it or anything, to Tom Deal and Dave Ernst, and there was another lawyer in there, I don't remember who that was. Just took over the practice. And I had a couple other businesses which I had to get rid of before I got out of town. And I got out of town something in a hurry, because I didn't realize that after my wife died, I would be pursued by widows with casseroles. And I didn't want to die by casseroles, so I left town.
Okay. So what are, we did an exhibit on Foster's Crossing, and included in that exhibit is a picture of a smoking monkey that was a resident of the Monkey Bar
Then it was called the Train Stop Inn, or before that, the Blue Danube.
So, you were involved in a case involving the monkey, so can you tell
Most
us a little
assuredly.
bit? Can you fill us in on the interesting points of that case?
Okay, well, keep an eye on your clock. Well, one day you're sitting in the office, and by this time you find out when the phone rings, you have no idea what's going to happen that day or any other time. So one morning, the phone rings, and it's Kenny Harris. Jim, this is Kenny. They got my monkey. Calm down. He was all excited. Calm down, Kenny. What's the problem here? Well, they got Sam, and they had charged Kenny Harris with cruelty to animals.
And he was the bar owner?
Right, he owned the Train Stop Inn. It was a pretty rough place. It was a biker bar, sort of. And I'd known Kenny for a long time. I don't know how. You practice law in a little town, pretty soon you knew everybody. And Sam had been seized by, or at the behest of the Humane Society of the United States, Inc., which, by the way, has nothing whatsoever to do with the United States of America. It's like PETA. It's one of these animals. And I didn't know much about them either. So I said, Kenny, come on up, and we'll talk about this and see. Well, they've seized Sam, who was an adult chimpanzee, and that's a large, dangerous animal. And they spirited him off to Columbus, to Ohio State veterinarian place, because they were going to, I suppose they're going to try to say that he was badly used. He did smoke, and he did drink, and he had various other habits which were found disgusting by some. Anyway, the reason for this is they put the bike trail in, and Foster's used to be a very rough little town. They had, there must have been 4 or 5 honky-tonks down there. And one biker group had their own house, a clubhouse down there. It was a pretty rough place. And I'll tell you how rough. When I was a little guy, 15 or 16, my buddy Bob McElwee and I were Boy Scouts, and he had his own car at 15. And we would go down to Foster's in our Boy Scout uniform and buy beer in a car that was his, but he didn't have a license. Times have changed. So anyway, Sam was, you'd hand him a beer, he'd open that, you'd hand him a pack of cigarettes, he'd open the pack of cigarettes, open the paper, knock one out, take it out, you'd hand him a big lighter, he'd light it and smoke the cigarette. He didn't really drink that much beer, but he did like grape soda. And he had a very plush pen. He had a couch, he had a TV, he had a refrigerator. All in all, with your smoking and drinking and other abuse, I said to some guy in the press, well, hell, he doesn't act like anything other than any other lawyer I know. So, anyway, it turned into something of a circus at my behest. It was a ridiculous charge. And so I made it fairly ridiculous to them. And it got a lot of press, locally and internationally and everything else.
Do you recall what years
It was, I think, 82, 80, something like you I don't know. And we went up to Columbus once I wanted to see my client, and I kept pushing because the press was getting bigger, man. They would, cover anything. It was an interesting story. We went up there, and somebody brought a little small chimpanzee named Susie, and she was all dressed up, and we said, well, that's Sam's girlfriend. Do you have any visits like you do in prison? No, they wouldn't have that. It just made the Humane Society of the United States look silly, which was my goal. And then as the trial was coming up, I, in my squirrely little way, would do all this preparation. Again, I owe it to her father. I found out that the Humane Society of the United States had not renewed their corporate charter, which you have to do, like, I think every 5 years, and it costs $5. And they didn't do it, and they were represented by a big law firm in Cincinnati. So I quickly made up new corporate papers for the Humane Society of the United States, Inc., sent them $75, and now I own the Humane Society of the United States, Inc. I was on the board of directors. Well, we didn't have a president yet, so I convened the board of directors meeting, which was me. And I elected Sam as the president of the Humane Society of the United States, and they deserved, and that got quite a hoot, and they deserved all they got over that. So we had a trial, and I brought in a carload of bananas and monkey chow to show that he was well fed and whatever, and it was a complete circus. I had a great time, which you wouldn't get if you were a Harvard graduate working in some law firm on Wall Street. So that was fun, and that's unintended consequences. All of a sudden, because of the publicity, I was suddenly representing people who would chicken fighters and people that had hybrid wolves, and then the phone rang one morning, and it was Mike Tyson's lawyer. And well, he had 2 white tigers up in northeastern Ohio, and people were aggrieved that, and he had a license and everything, was completely on the up and up on his farm up there. And so I got that. I represented Mike Tyson doing that. And the theory was a zoning violation. There was a school like a mile away, and the neighbors were concerned if the tigers got out, they could come to the school. And I argued that white tigers are quite rare. There are not many, and there are plenty of kids. So I didn't do so well. That case kind of went away when Mike bit off Holyfield's ear. So you see what kind of fun you can have with a country lawyer.
That's pretty funny.
And before you ask, I don't know what happened to Sam. I think he went to because they kept pressure on Kenny, the bike trail, and the yuppies didn't like to see this caged large animal, so he went to some retirement home for chimps, I guess.
Yeah, there's a very mysterious ending to that because nobody seems to know where he went.
Now that Kenny's gone, no one will know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, and frankly, I never asked because I go on to other stuff, and I wasn't a customer of the train stop in much.
Okay. Any other interesting cases that you would like to talk about?
Well, golly, I'm just.
And Jennifer, you can feel
Yeah.
free to share anything that you were involved with.
Oh, I'm done. Unless you have a question,
Do you have any other questions?
No, I feel like I've learned a lot today, and I'm very intrigued.
Anything else you would like to add to the oral history interview?
Well, not really, but it was an idyllic time, I think, at an ideal place for a guy like me who just loves all sorts of things and different people, and you can do anything you want to do. I had a fascinating career.
Okay, well then we are going to conclude the interview.